Investors are eager to put more money into China. One U.S. official wants to ban TikTok, and a protest erupts after a 3-year-old dies in lockdown, and not from COVID. That and more in this week's China News headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Have you ever wanted to be a lord? I certainly have, and now I am, thanks to our sponsor, Established Titles. That's right, I am officially Lord Chris Chappell. And you can be a lord or a lady too. I'll explain how at the end. There's a new era of China investment, and it's powered by wishful thinking. Yep, China investors have the same strategy as dads who gamble away their kids' college funds at the blackjack tables. I suppose that's not all that different from the last couple decades, except now it's even more wishful. Rumors of a reopening in China have sent stocks flying. Specifically, Hong Kong and mainland China ripped higher on rumors that a government committee has been established to study and plan for a full reopening in China in March 2023. In other words, China is not reopening from its zero COVID policy yet, and it hasn't announced that it will open in March or at any other time, really. There are merely rumors that the Chinese government established a committee to look into the possibility. And when has a government committee ever been a disappointment? This is like celebrating that your parents are going to take you to Disney World because you thought you overheard them listening to the Encanto soundtrack. On top of that, we don't even know if there is a committee since, at his daily press conference, the foreign minister's spokesperson stated he was unaware of such a committee. Which doesn't matter because whether or not the rumor is true, it shows investors' desire for such a plan, which is why such a committee will likely be established. Yes, because as we all know, the Chinese Communist Party always does what investors want them to do. Essentially, the market right now is going, so you're saying there's a chance? Wait a second. You know, I heard a rumor that next year, Elon Musk will form a committee that will give out $1 million to everyone who sends me $1 right now. If you find that convincing, you're smart enough to work on Wall Street, or really any global investment bank. Because at a conference in Hong Kong this week, global bankers were very pro-China. Yes, everyone among a totally unbiased sample size of the rich elite who decided it was politically safe for them to visit Hong Kong despite the total lack of freedoms there. Global bankers are all very pro-China, according to the chair of multinational investment bank UBS. He spoke at a financial forum in Hong Kong where Chinese officials sought to woo rattled international investors. And Chinese officials presented their best case for why foreigners should put money into China despite everything that's happening there. I assume it's the same case the CCP always makes. Sure, we run a totalitarian regime that covered up a pandemic and commits ethnic genocide. But on the other hand, money? Well, you've convinced us again. The Hong Kong government even made a particular point of ensuring the forum went forward as planned, allowing attendees some respite from certain pandemic restrictions that apply elsewhere in the city. Guys, I figured out the formula. Step 1. Invite rich global investors to a conference about how they should invest in China, because it's going to open up very, very soon. Step 2, put them in a bubble where COVID rules don't apply to them. Step 3, profit. The only idiots who don't believe COVID restrictions will be lifted soon are literally every person actually living in China. And there's a growing backlash over the zero COVID lockdowns. The latest case happened this week when a 3-year-old boy in the city of Lanzhou died in lockdown. He didn't die of COVID. He died of carbon monoxide poisoning because of a gas leak in the building where he and his parents had been locked down for a month. The father posted his story on social media saying that after his son fell unconscious, he tried to call an ambulance and the police but failed to get through. He tried to ask the COVID workers enforcing the lockdown to help, but they refused. The workers asked him to show a negative COVID test result, but he could not do so as no tests had been carried out at the compound in the previous 10 days. He finally grabbed his son, broke through the lockdown fence, and ran outside where someone helped him flag down a taxi. But it was too late. His son died at the hospital. This story caused a huge backlash. Videos circulated on social media showing Lanzhou residents protesting on the streets, calling for accountability for the child's death. In this video, a guy is shouting, "Give me back my freedom." And of course, Lanzhou authorities knew exactly what to do. Send in the riot police! But don't worry, everything's fine, because the father's social media posts have now been censored. Problem solved. And after the break, could the U.S. ban TikTok? Welcome back. Have you ever heard of the city of Zhengzhou? It's another third-tier city that's been under lockdown for a month. It has about 12 million residents, and they've been getting pretty fed up with being confined to their tiny apartments, along with the violent quarantine enforcement and lousy medical care. 1 star, would not recommend. Zhengzhou is also the city where iPhone maker Foxconn locked down a factory with 200,000 people, which I'll talk about in tomorrow's episode. Well, now, the people of Zhengzhou are accusing local authorities of performative lockdown lifting. Residents accused authorities of lifting restrictions only to reduce scrutiny of the lockdown severity. They started posting the hashtag performative lockdown lifting on Weibo, China's version of Twitter, but it seems that hashtag has now been blocked. Because while Chinese authorities might once in a while lift COVID lockdowns, they'll always quarantine dissenting opinions. The public also shared images appearing to show state-run CCTV news employees interviewing members of the public in areas that somehow don't seem to be under lockdown. On CCTV's Weibo account, one resident posted, "It is because of you that our neighborhoods get unsealed. Zhengzhou welcomes you to do interviews here." So people in China are smart enough to connect the dots. The lockdowns are still happening, the reports on state-run media are fake, and no one in China believes the government or state-run media anymore. That's tragic. I mean, who are authorities even able to lie to anymore? Oh wait, Wall Street. Have you noticed that China Uncensored is not on TikTok? That's because my dance moves are too good to give away for free. Also, it's because TikTok shares your data more than any other social media app, and it's unclear where that data goes. In fact, TikTok has a secret operation that tracks you even if you don't use it. TikTok is like Santa Claus. It watches you when you're sleeping and when you're awake, and yet people think it's awesome. No, they're both creepy. Stop letting them into your home. And keep in mind that TikTok is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance. Yes, this ByteDance. So forgive me if I'm not interested in being part of it. Well, you know who else isn't? FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr. That's the U.S. government agency that regulates communications on the radio, television, etc. He says the U.S. ought to ban TikTok. Unrelated, but Carr also became the first FCC commissioner to visit Taiwan this week. I think I like this guy so far. BuzzFeed has reported that China-based engineers working for TikTok accessed U.S. users' personal information, including phone numbers and birthdays, and that parent company ByteDance, that's right, this ByteDance, told its employees to push pro-CCP messages to American TikTok users. And that's probably why Carr told Axios, "I don't believe there is a path forward for anything other than a ban." Of course, Carr is only one of the 5 FCC commissioners, and the FCC itself can't ban TikTok. A ban would have to go through either Congress or through the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., both of which are pretty slow to act on anything. But if the U.S. does ban TikTok, that would put it only about 2 or 3 years behind India, which was smart enough to do that in the summer of 2020. There's obviously a quicker solution here. I challenge TikTok to a dance-off. Prepare to be pulverized by the premium moves, you wannabe Santa Claus. And after the break, Australia tries to counter China with the gift of semi-automatic weapons. Welcome back. The Chinese regime is trying to influence small Pacific Island nations with the hope of eventually getting naval bases in the Pacific. they've been pretty successful so far with the Solomon Islands, which is here. For example, by giving them millions of dollars to build a stadium, and by training local police in how to fight crime with Chinese characteristics. Although you could just get a magician to train the police, since the Chinese method of policing is making people disappear. The Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands has also been accused of corruption, basically paying off members of parliament with Chinese funds to support a security pact with China. Well, now Australia is taking a step to counter China's influence. A stupid step. Australia is giving the Solomon Islands police, the ones being trained by China, dozens of semi-automatic rifles and vehicles. I mean, if Australia doesn't give them weapons, China will. And that would be worse, somehow? I don't get it. Solomon Islands opposition leader Matthew Wally asked, obviously we do not have external threats, so why the introduction of these high-powered guns? Well, obviously, Mr. Wally, Australia thinks that by giving the Prime Minister a gift, he'll side with Australia instead of China. It's called wishful thinking. Haven't you heard of it? And now, thanks to Australia's gift, the corrupt Prime Minister has a bunch of guns which he can give to his China-trained police to protect freedom. Right? 50 countries at the United Nations have condemned China's action against the Uyghurs. Things like, putting them in concentration camps. Ambassadors, rights activists, and investigators met last week to discuss a report by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. That report had called what's happening in Xinjiang a genocide, without actually using the word genocide so as not to upset the perpetrators. Because, they're systematically wiping out a group of ethnic minorities, but that's no excuse to be rude. Still, it wasn't enough. China expressed its resolute opposition to the meeting and suggested that countries boycott this anti-China event, calling it disinformation propaganda. So what did the UN meeting last week actually accomplish? The countries urged China to fully implement the recommendations of the UN report and to release all those arbitrarily deprived of their liberty. After all, that's how the Allied powers defeated Hitler, by politely asking him to knock it off. And China responded by saying, you know what, you're right. All that genocide was just an accident. We're going to release everyone now. Or is that, what's the phrase? Wishful thinking? And this episode is sponsored by Established Titles. Thanks to this certificate, I'm now officially Lord Chris Chappell. And you can be too. Not the Chris Chappell part, the Lord part. Or you can be a lady if that's your thing. It's based on an old Scottish custom where landowners are referred to as lords or ladies, or laird if you're Scottish. When you buy a title pack using the link below, you'll get at least 1 square foot of dedicated land on a private estate in Edelston, Scotland, plus an official certificate with a crest. And for every purchase, Established Titles will plant at least 1 tree through working with a charity like One Tree Planted or Trees for the Future. So you can be a lord and help the environment, and then lord over it. And when you do become a lord or lady, you could even officially include that title on your credit card or airplane ticket, etc. I'm not saying it'll necessarily give you special privileges, but you can legitimately do it. I mean, why not include your new title on your dating profile and see what happens? The point is, being a lord or lady is strictly for fun, but it could be a lot of fun. And if you're among the first 200 people to get your established title using my link below, you'll be pretty much right next to my plot, which means we can build our own small China Uncensored kingdom together in Scotland. Now that's fun. So visit establishedtitles.com/uncensored and get your official title today. And if you buy it on Black Friday or earlier, you'll get 10% off. It makes a great last-minute gift for your parents, friends, or, let's be honest, yourself. The link is below. I'm Lord Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.